Hello, welcome back. I thought we would start this train journey. I've filmed all of this out of sequence and I'm really sorry for that, but this video will be the first official train video that you see on the channel. So today we're going to talk about the layout idea that I had, what my options were, which ones I wanted to go with, which ones I couldn't go with, and what I inevitably went with. I'm going to try and talk through it as much as possible with the idea that people like this, and hopefully you'll see it in the future videos how it's come to what it's going to be. I would love to say that I've got lots of real world pictures that I wanted to add onto this, but unfortunately I haven't got them yet. I might do a video of just pictures that I've taken that have provided inspiration, or in future things when I'm working on particular parts and go, this is where I got that idea from. So I've done various notes over the time. I used two books for reference for this, which is the Portsmouth to Southampton line book, which I'll put a picture up here, and the Chichester to Portsmouth line book that are available any hobby shops and Amazon and second-hand bookshops and stuff like that. I use that for a lot of the reference of how I was going to lay everything out. I'm going to talk about what sort of era this is all set in, what parts are fictional, what parts are real, like what I am doing to try and make it so that it is as real as possible, but what I have done from my own point of view to make it so it's more fun for me as well at the same time, but let it be known that it is based on a real life location. So without any further waiting, I'm going to go to the top down of my notes, talk through all the little bits and bobs. You can see some of the horrific drawings and some of the drawings where I actually took time to do, and then I'll talk through the layout in terms of what's upstairs already, and then in a future episode you'll be able to see the layout being opened for the first time. Okay, so looking at designs and plans and everything that I wanted to do, first thing I had to decide was it going to be fictional? Was it going to be based on a real place? Was it going to be an amalgamation of a real place with some fictional aspects? In the end I decided on the latter, and I wanted to do one that I could go and visit and take pictures of to sort of get inspiration from. Portsmouth, where I am from, has 4 stations. It has Hilsea, Fratton, Portsmouth and Southsea, and Portsmouth Harbour. Now Hilsea is a very small station, and not everything stops there, whereas you have Fratton, Portsmouth and Southsea, and Portsmouth Harbour that pretty much has trains stopping there all the time. So I looked at the 3 big stations and had a look at what things I wanted from my layout and what things would be really useful to have there. So if we start right from the very end, so Portsmouth Harbour is a big terminus. It's where all the trains come in and stop, and then they go back out again. I wanted a continuous loop. I wanted to be able to just have trains running constantly on the layout. I know I could get modules and stuff to have shuttle servicing and stuff like that, but I didn't fancy that at this particular point in time. So that one was out of the question. Now, whilst that one would have been a great modelling opportunity because a lot of that's raised, whereas the other ones in Portsmouth aren't necessarily raised, it allowed you to do loads of different things. I decided against it. Then you've got Portsmouth and Southsea, which is the central station to a certain degree. That one's quite interesting because it has both terminus and a run-through, so it allows you to model both kinds of stations there. The run-through basically has quite a steep gradient that comes from the coming onto the island side of it, goes up, and you have 2 platforms that go upstairs in the station and then go out again and go off to Portsmouth Harbour. Then you have the terminus side of it, where you have several platforms down on the lower level where the trains stop there and then go back out towards heading off the island towards Fratton, towards Hilsea and stuff like that. So that one seemed like a nice little modelling opportunity. I didn't fancy doing the steep gradient part of it though, so eventually I decided against it. I then decided that actually Fratton, which is another big station, has a lot of modelling opportunity. It has various different things there that aren't just a station, and it also has lots of scope depending on what I wanted to do with the layout. So I said, right, okay, Fratton. I'm going to base my layout on Fratton. I'm going to keep the name, and then I'm going to come up with several ideas, which are the ones that you'll be able to see in a second, and then decide which ones work best for me and what things I wanted out of them. So it's worth saying at this point that whilst I'm going to be modelling after Fratton, there's going to be a few things that I've decided to change based on what I want from my layout and what would look better from my point of view moving forward. So if you had a look at Google Maps, the main thing that I would consider to be the big start of Fratton is Fratton Bridge, which I would say would just be on this edge here. You then go through to the train station. It would then divide up, so you'd have a massive train care depot facility that would go off towards down here, and then you'd have your through lines that would go up here and then start heading north, well, continue east, then heading northeast, and then finally north off the island. If you were coming into Fratton, it has two lines that come from off the island, come in, and then they sort of verge off. As you leave Fratton's train station, it has 4 lines that go off it, which meant that I'd either have to do 4 lines or 2 lines and then sort of work around it. And you're going to see over these various examples different ideas that I came up with. So on the far left, what I decided was actually there's a set of points that go from the top line, which is the outbound line, and work its way across to this 4th line here. And all of that happens just before Fratton Bridge. Then after Fratton Bridge, on the lower side here, this is where it goes off towards the train wash and the facility for storing all of the EMUs and things in the depot. It's got a train wash section, and if you carried on along this 4th line, which there seems to be quite a lot that happens on this 4th line, which I never realised. There's also a fueling depot, which I believe is for the Great Western trains that come in, because I believe they're the only diesel ones that come in that aren't freight or anything like that. And because we don't have the docks or anything like that like Southampton does, we don't actually get a lot of freight that comes into Portsmouth via the rail. It's then got a few sections off that 4th line, and eventually what it does is it cuts across, goes onto the 2nd line, and then you can go back onto the 1st line, which allows you to go outside of the city. 3rd line here will lead you to 1 platform. Then you've got the 2nd line, which is your main inbound to the island. This platform tends to get used for inbound as well, but I have seen trains previously going on this one to go out, although not very often. And then the 1st platform here, which has got the station, the main station building up here, that is your platform 1 outbound out of the city. Now I thought this is a really nice idea. It gives you a little bit of scope. There's a lot of little sidings, a lot of things that I didn't necessarily know about railway wise until I started researching them and watching other people who do model railways and stuff like that. So moving on to idea 2. So this one would effectively be a prototype. You'll see I've written how many points you'd need for each particular layout depending on what you were after. In the end, that actually didn't help me make my mind up in any way, shape or form. So what I did here is same sort of thing on this 2nd one for the prototype. You'd have your outbound and inbound lines, and then the 3rd and 4th line. But on the 3rd line, rather than it going off toward Portsmouth and Southsea like the other lines, where you've got your 4 above here, I tried to do it so that you had just the 3rd platform or the 3rd line as just sort of a loop round, so that you didn't have to worry about an additional set of points, and also it meant that you didn't have to worry about a line going off that you wouldn't necessarily always be using. 4th line still going off towards that Portsmouth and Southsea, Portsmouth Harbour thing. What I then did was I followed the fueling side of it, but I cut off the depot and the train wash section, because for me that wasn't something that I'd necessarily be interested in, storing loads and loads of carriages, which at the moment I don't have and I don't have a lot of DMUs or EMUs, so it would be something I'd have to really think about. But I did like the idea of the fueling station for the diesel locomotives that would be coming in. And then what I decided to do was add at the end here a sort of a siding, so trying to add a little bit of that but putting it on further down the line, so if I didn't have as wide a space I'd still be able to have some sort of sidings to store coaches and carriages and stuff like that, or put big freight things if I wanted to. I then, after reading the source materials that I was reading, I think it's in both the Portsmouth and Southampton and the Portsmouth to Chichester books, there used to be a Southsea East line that went from Fratton, and it basically went down the island and it sort of did this loop where it went round and down towards east of Southsea, which, if you know Southsea, was somewhere around the St Simon's Church sort of area, and it was a little terminus around there. It looped round down Goldsmith Avenue and things like that. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I could put in a sort of a shuttle module here for DMU, EMU or shuttle or something like that, and sort of put in this fictitious platform that would be connected by the footbridge that runs across Fratton. And I could have it so that I had this train going off into sort of like a scenic break, and then would just sort of keep shuttling backwards and forwards. And I thought that'd be something nice to add in, because you'd also have this sort of back and forwards thing going on, as well as the loop going around. I then used inspiration from other people who do model railways, such as Everard Junction, and that was a big inspiration for this last idea. I thought it'd be fun to do a layout that had that sort of 2 high-speed lines and 2 normal lines. Now that would mean that I could run at least 2 trains plus a possible 4 going at the same time, and maybe even a 5th if I had this sort of shuttle loop here. Keeping in the fueling station and putting in the sidings but making them a lot smaller. Now I thought this would be something quite fun, but then I thought Portsmouth doesn't have the infrastructure to do that, and it would mean that I'd need a lot more space, or I'd have to cut out certain things on there. Plus, every time I looked at it, all I kept thinking was, I'm basically copying Everard Junction, because he has the same thing where he has the 2 high-speed lines at the top. He has the 2 lines for freight and through traffic and stuff like that there. He also has the branch line shuttle going on down here. So I thought, I feel like I'm just copying him. So what I did was I sat down and worked out, okay, what do I need / want from this layout? I want at least 2 lines that can continuously run, a possibility of a little bit of shunting or moving around elsewhere, and then anything else is sort of an added bonus. So you almost using all 3 of these ideas, I eventually decided on this idea, and I'm going to put a better picture of this up on there. So before I go ahead, it's worth mentioning that if you could see these drawings with a curve, coming into Fratton would sort of curve around like this, and then as you left Fratton it would curve up northwards towards going out the island, which would mean that if I was doing that I would effectively be stood here or against this edge on the middle one, or this one on the third one, and have sort of the station right up against where I would be stood, and then all the sort of the shunting parts and the sort of intricate parts would all be on further away from me. From a modelling side of it, and how I wanted to be able to operate the layout and be within easy reach of this sort of area, I decided to sort of flip it a little bit, so that I'm going to use this top one as an example. So this line here would actually be the line that would be up against me, the station building, and the 2 through lines, the loop sections, would be as far back as possible. Now the reason I decided to go with this was it meant that the radius curves on the 2 loop lines could be a lot bigger, whereas if I went for any of the other ways and flipped it round, it would mean that the high speed lines in essence would be the tighter curves, and the through lines would be the smaller curves, and I didn't want that. I wanted the bigger curves on the through lines with the bigger trains. So what I did was I flipped it, so on the actual layout, on this very crude drawing that you can see just here, was
I flipped it round so that you still had Fratton Bridge here, but rather than curving off to that way, it all curves around this way. And then likewise, rather than curving off this way at the end, going off the island, it curves around this way. It made the modelling side of it a lot easier for me to do. The point section all went down here. So on this sort of particular wall, should we say, the points all basically go across. And because I'm using the express points, I needed the space for that. So I've got that there. And then it does a sort of a vice versa on this side with the two lines. Now, going off here, going round and going back round to here would mean that these two lines here either weren't needed or would need to be hidden or would need to just be long sidings, which is fine. I like sidings, I like storage for stuff and the ability to possibly do the shunting on this fourth and third line. So what I did was, as the train loops around on here, the third line goes onto the second line whilst on the main stretch still. But this fourth line, which would eventually reach the second line if it kept going and was on the normal track, actually comes round on this corner in the actual layout. But it allows me to have these two lines where I can effectively put trains where they can wait, they can sit there, they can do other things, or when a train pulls into a station on one of these platforms, I can isolate those particular trains, and then these two trains can go off in whichever direction that they want. It means that I don't get the continuous running of up to 4 locos, but it does mean that I'm able to do some other things without the need for 4 massive lines running around the entire loft. So what that means is that I've got this fiddle yard section that goes all the way down here. At the moment, in the way it's standing, it is just 2 lines that runs around here, which allows me to, if I want stop trains there, take them off and put a different train on and then start running it again. I have enough points that I could put in some extra lines so that a train could go into one siding and then can come back out again and go on to whichever line is feasible and whichever one I want at that time. That is basically everything to do with how the layout works, what my current plan is for it. I also wrote down here what parts I needed in terms of points to be able to finish each particular loop. So the first line, I had to make sure that I had at least 1 point coming off it here and then 1 point coming off it here, which was nice and easy. And then the second line here needed a few more. It needed the points to join to the first line, just here. It also needed at least 1 point that would eventually go off to the third line, plus it would need the point to join to the first line here, but it would also need 2 points here to go off towards the third and fourth line. Hopefully you're still with me. That was fairly easy to complete. The last bit I needed was the part that connected to the fourth line on there. And then eventually the fourth line, which I think is a little way off at the moment, just because I need additional points here. Plus I also need to get the points for this section. That can wait. That can be something that I work on later. It means that I can at least get started on getting some of the platforms ready over here. The joy of knowing that there's only effectively 2 platforms at the moment anyway means that I can get those 2 platforms done. It serves 3 lines, which once I have enough straight track and flexi track, I'll be able to join up that third line as well. So I'll have a siding that I can put 1 train in so that another train can go through and they can sort of sit there and wait. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this particular layout. I'd be really intrigued to hear what you think about it. Give me your thoughts in the description down below. I will try and get a video up with some images of the layout as it's improving, as it's being done. I will also try and put in some better pictures of this here. Future Sam, if you've done that, brilliant. If you haven't, shame on you. Yeah, leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments down below as well. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much.